Long, long ago, in a time when God's people, the Israelites, were slaves in Egypt, a baby boy was born. His parents, Amram and Jochebed, were from the tribe of Levi. Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, feared that the Israelites were growing too numerous and powerful. So, he ordered the midwives to kill all Hebrew newborn baby boys. But when Jochebed saw her baby boy, she saw there was something special about him. She hid him for 3 months. She couldn't bear to let him die. So, when she couldn't hide him any longer, she got a little basket made of papyrus. She waterproofed it with tar and pitch and placed the child in it. Then she set it afloat in the reeds at the edge of the Nile River. Miriam, Moses' older sister, then stood at a distance, watching to see what would happen to her floating baby brother. Soon Pharaoh's daughter came down to the Nile River to bathe. Her attendants strolled along the riverbank. When the princess saw a basket among the reeds, and she sent her maid to get it for her. When the princess opened it, she saw the baby. The little boy was crying, and she felt sorry for him. She said, "This must be one of the Hebrew children." Moses' sister Miriam, who had been watching all along from a distance, came near. She approached the princess and asked, "Should I go and find one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" The princess agreed. Miriam went and called the baby's mother. The princess told the mother, "Take this baby and nurse him for me. I'll pay you." The woman took the child and nursed him. After the child was weaned, she was presented to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her son. She named him Moses, meaning pulled from the water. Time passed. Moses grew up. One day he went and saw his people's hard labor. Then he saw an Egyptian hit a Hebrew. He looked this way and that way and realized there was no one looking his way. Filled with anger and wanting to stop the injustice, Moses killed the Egyptian in an act of rage. When Pharaoh heard of it, he was furious and ordered Moses to be killed. Moses had no choice but to flee Egypt. He ran to the land of Midian. There he met a Median priest called Jethro. Jethro welcomed Moses into his home. Moses agreed to settle down there, and Jethro gave him his daughter Zipporah for a wife. She had a son, and Moses named him Gershom. For many years, Moses worked as a shepherd, far away from Egypt.
Many years later, the king of Egypt died. Meanwhile, the Israelites groaned under the Egyptian slavery. They cried out to God. Their cries and groanings for relief from their hard labor ascended to God. God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Meanwhile in Midian, Moses was tending his father-in-law's sheep in the wilderness. He led the flock to the west end of the wilderness and came to Mount Horeb. Then he saw something strange. A bush was on fire, but it wasn't burning up. Intrigued, he approached the bush. God saw that he had stopped to look, and he called to him from out of the bush, "Moses, Moses." Moses answered, "Here I am." The voice, which was God's voice, spoke to him and said, "Don't come any closer. Remove your sandals from your feet. You're standing on holy ground." God said to Moses, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." Moses hid his face, afraid to look. God told Moses that he had seen the affliction of his people and heard their cries because of their harsh slave drivers. "I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them into their own fertile and spacious land. It is a land flowing with milk and honey." He was going to rescue them, and he wanted Moses to be the one to rescue and lead them out of slavery. But Moses protested, "Who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead your people out of Egypt?" But God reassured him, saying, "I will be with you." God instructed Moses to go back to Egypt and tell Pharaoh to let his people go. Moses stood in front of the burning bush, trembling, questioning how he could possibly carry out God's mission. But God gave him signs to prove his power, telling Moses that he would be with him every step of the way. God even revealed his sacred name, "I am who I am," a name that meant he was eternal and all-powerful. Moses, still uncertain but filled with awe, finally agreed. He knew he couldn't do this alone, but with God's help, he could. He left the wilderness and returned to Egypt, ready to be used by God. ready to see God do the impossible, freeing his people from slavery. And so, Moses began the journey that would change the course of history. From the humble start of a baby in a basket, to a prince of Egypt, to the shepherd in the desert, and finally to the leader chosen by God to free his people. This story relates to us today. No matter where your journey begins, God sees the end. Allow him through his Spirit to guide you through your life's journey. Before Jesus ascended, he said in John 16 verse 13, "When the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all truth. He will not speak on his own but will tell you what he has heard." So God's leading is the best. Jesus is willing to lead those who are willing to be led by him. It all starts by seeking for a relationship with God the Father, Jesus, his Son, and his Spirit.